You worked in a cafeteria, went to community college, and now you think you have the right to tell others how to succeed? Don't confuse your stubbornness with success. That's what my sister said, right to my face, at a small cafe, while my family tried to reclaim what they had once so easily thrown away. If you've ever been mocked for starting from the bottom, or looked down on just for daring to rise on your own, stay with me. This story is for you. The smell of overcooked pot roast clung to the air, thick with something heavier than meat and gravy. I sat at the edge of the table, fingers pressed into my lap, watching the fork in Victoria's hand as it danced midair. She was telling a story again, loud and beaming. I barely listened. My eyes had been fixed on Mom's expression for the past 5 minutes. Too smooth, too carefully neutral. A few hours earlier, I had walked past the living room just as Victoria's voice lifted above the television hum. They're already scheduling Olivia's private school interviews. Full ride or not, this girl's gonna have options. She's only 12. I heard myself mutter under my breath, stopping just outside the doorway. I leaned closer. Their backs were turned. Mom's voice was calm, almost mechanical. It's never too early to think ahead. Better for her to stand out now. College scouts love early achievers. I blinked. Olivia? Private school? My niece? My chest tightened. I stood frozen, stuck between walking away and storming in. Instead, I turned and headed upstairs. If I was going to confront this, I needed to be sure. Later, as we gathered for dinner in the kitchen with its flickering fluorescent bulb and stained linoleum, I watched Dad poke at his mashed potatoes like they were solving algebra beneath the gravy. He hadn't spoken more than 5 words to me since Thursday. Victoria was bubbling with excitement, reciting Olivia's debate accomplishments. Mom sat quietly at the head of the table, nodding when needed, a queen in her dull castle. I cleared my throat. Have you sent in my FAFSA forms yet? I tried to keep my voice even. Deadlines are next week. Mom didn't even look up. We'll talk about it later. I waited. Nothing. I mean, I need to submit it soon, especially if I'm applying for any aid. I've done all the essays. Dad reached for the salt, still silent. Victoria chuckled softly. College? Have you even decided where you want to go? Olivia's been eyeing Stanford since 5th grade. She's so focused. I looked at her. I'm 17. She's 12. Mom finally set her fork down, wiping her mouth with the napkin slowly, deliberately. Actually, there's something we've been meaning to tell you. She smiled, but not at me. At Victoria. My stomach dropped. We've decided to use the college funds for Olivia. It landed like a slap. I stared at her. What? It just makes more sense, she continued, tone matter of fact. She's got the drive, the track record. This is a long-term investment. I thought... I blinked, trying to keep my voice from shaking. That money was meant for me. It was meant for a future, she corrected. And Olivia's future is clearer. But what about me? My voice cracked. You'll figure it out, she said, sipping her water as though we were discussing the weather. You always do. Something inside me folded in on itself. Not anger, just a cold, tight numbness. I looked around. Dad was staring at the window. Victoria was already cutting another piece of meat. No one else spoke. After dinner, I climbed the stairs without a word. The hallway smelled like lavender from the wall plug-in Mom had bought last month. My room, still filled with college brochures, felt like a bad joke. I opened the closet, reached for the small box with a painted pink pig on it. The piggy bank was heavier than I remembered. I sat cross-legged on the floor and twisted the rubber stopper open. Coins clinked as I poured them out. Quarters, nickels, dusty pennies. At the very bottom was a folded slip of yellowed paper. I unfolded it slowly. Enrollment confirmation. Crescent Hill preschool student. Olivia Gray tuition payment. Received $3,200. Date, August 5th, 2012. Paid by Linda Bennett, Guardian. I stared at it 6 years ago. That piggy bank wasn't mine. It never had been. I disappeared from their plans, but not from the world. My feet echoed down the narrow hallway of Crestview Community College, each step a quiet rebellion. The walls were plastered with curling posters about tutoring jobs and mental health workshops, none of which I had time for. I kept my head low, hoodie drawn tight against the chill of October air that always seeped in through the leaky windows. No one looked up as I passed. That suited me fine. My days began before sunrise and ended long after midnight. Most mornings, I served eggs to half-asleep students and absent-minded professors in the campus cafeteria. By noon, I was in lectures, taking notes like a machine. Evenings were for the library, nights for tutoring calculus to local high schoolers via Zoom, and the scraps of silence in between belonged to me and whatever dream I was trying to stitch together. I didn't talk much. People assumed I was shy. I let them. What they didn't see was the spreadsheet I updated daily, tracking every dollar, every deadline, every scholarship essay submitted. I kept a whiteboard above my bed with 3 columns: current, pending, and possible. It wasn't glamorous. Nothing was. But it was mine. One Thursday after class, a woman tapped the edge of my desk with a red pen. "I've seen you twice now," she said, arching a brow. "You don't speak, but you don't miss a beat either. You ever consider finance?" I blinked up at her, momentarily caught off guard. She had the kind of stare that made you feel like she already knew your answer. "I'm Nora," I said finally. "And maybe, if I can afford the classes." She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. "Dr. Moore," she said. "Office hours are Tuesday and Thursday. Come by." That was it. No pitch, no promise, just a door left ajar. Weeks passed and I kept showing up. Dr. Moore never sugarcoated anything. She challenged me at every turn. She asked questions that burned long after I left her office. She made me redo papers that already had A's stamped on them. She once circled a paragraph and wrote, "Try again. You're hiding behind vocabulary." But she listened. And that was a kind of currency I hadn't known how much I'd been craving. By spring of sophomore year, she handed me a printout mid-conversation. "There's a mentorship program. 1 slot left. I'm recommending you. Say yes." I didn't say yes. I nodded and got to work. That summer, we started sketching ideas during her lunch breaks. She had noticed a pattern: bright students from underfunded schools losing opportunities simply because they didn't know how to navigate the system. I had lived that pattern. We called it the Pathlight Guide. A small blog at first, then a growing site with downloadable resources, weekly Q&As, even a chatbot coded by one of my roommates. We stayed up until 3 a.m., most nights writing articles like how to write a killer scholarship essay, when your life feels average, and FAFSA without tears, a survival toolkit. It wasn't flashy, but by the time I hit my final year, our site had helped over 2,000 students secure grants. I never posted about it. I didn't need to. The day I graduated, debt-free, in a thrifted navy gown 2 inches too short, I didn't hear from my family. Not even a text. Victoria posted a picture of Olivia's middle school orchestra solo that afternoon. I didn't click it. Instead, I walked to the clerk's office with a sealed envelope in my bag. Inside, my business registration for the Pathlight Initiative, LLC. The woman behind the counter scanned it briefly. "You're all set. You'll get confirmation in a week." I thanked her, stepped outside, and let the cold spring air bite into my lungs. It was the kind of feeling you don't know how to label. Not joy, not pride, just space. For once, I had carved out space. 3 days later, I got a notification from Google Alerts. My name had appeared in an education tech blog I'd forgotten I subscribed to. The woman who turned silence into strategy, a former cafeteria worker, now runs one of the most promising ed equity startups. I reread the headline 3 times. No picture, no fanfare. Just a quiet truth, printed in black and white. I didn't share the article. I screenshotted it and saved it to a folder labeled Receipts. I'd spent years building a world where they didn't exist, and then they showed up at the edge of it. The knock was soft, like someone unsure they had the right door. I almost didn't answer. The afternoon was gold-tinted and fading, the kind that stretched long shadows across my living room floor. I was finishing up edits for a grant proposal, earbuds in, eyes glazed from too many hours staring at a screen. But then it came again, more insistent. I paused the podcast. The voice of the guest still echoed in my mind. Family doesn't always mean support. Sometimes it means recovering from damage. I stood slowly. No one visited me unannounced. No one visited at all. When I opened the door, time fractured. My mother stood in the middle. Her coat was thin for the season, her face thinner. Her voice used to command rooms. Now it sounded like paper. "Hi, Nora." To her left, Victoria looked like she'd been dragged here against her will. Her arms were crossed, jaw clenched like she was chewing glass. She wore the same smug expression I remembered, but it didn't sit as easily anymore. And there, on the right, Olivia. She said nothing. Her eyes found mine, then drifted to the floor. The bags under them were dark, the perfection dulled. She wore a college hoodie I didn't recognize. I didn't move. The door stayed half open, my hand braced against the frame. Inside, warm wood and clean lines. Behind them, gray clouds and the muffled hum of the city. "We wouldn't be here if it wasn't important," my mother said, glancing at the floor, then up at me. "Olivia didn't get into grad school. Anywhere. The fallback programs either closed admissions or..." She sighed. "Well, it's been a rough year." Victoria jumped in before I could respond. "She's a good kid, Nora. She just needs a reset. A little help to apply again next cycle. The right preparation. Maybe some professional guidance. We heard you work with students." I raised a brow. "You mean the scholarship site you never acknowledged?" She flinched barely. "We didn't understand it then." Olivia shifted. Her hands were buried in the sleeves of her sweatshirt. Still silent. My mother tried to fill the gap. "You've done really well. We're proud." I barked out a laugh. "Are you?" The hallway air seemed to shrink. "I know we made mistakes," she said quickly. "But this isn't about the past. It's about Olivia's future." I stepped back an inch, but not far enough to invite them in. "You used mine to fund hers," I said evenly. "And now that it didn't work out, you're hoping I can pick up the slack?" My voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. But I saw something flicker in Victoria's eyes. "She didn't ask for this," Victoria said. "She didn't make the choices we did." Olivia looked up then, just for a second. "She's not the one you should be mad at." "I'm not mad," I said. "I just don't owe you anything." Silence. Heavy. My mother reached for something to say, but it never made it past her lips. Victoria took one step forward. "You want revenge?" she snapped. "Fine, just don't take it out on her." The words hit like a match on dry leaves. Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, I didn't move. They assumed I was done keeping score. But silence is just memory with a sharp edge. The wind outside Elliot's brew scraped against the tall glass windows like a warning. It was one of those Chicago afternoons where fall refused to be pretty. Gusts pushing against buildings, sky bruised and gray, the kind of weather that made you feel like the city was testing your spine. I chose the booth furthest from the door, back against the wall, facing the entrance. Victoria arrived 7 minutes late, designer coat clinging too tightly to her figure as she unwrapped herself and forced a smile. Her eyes scanned the cafe like someone stepping onto unfamiliar turf. She looked older, not in the way time marked us, but in the way pressure thinned a person out. She sat across from me like a woman sitting at a negotiation table, hands folded too deliberately. "Thanks for agreeing to meet," she began, her tone diplomatic, like I was a vendor she needed to win over. I nodded once. My coffee steamed between us. Victoria leaned in slightly. I think, I think we've both carried things for too long. Maybe it's time to put them down. For Olivia's sake, if nothing else. For Olivia, I repeated softly. She misread my tone and continued. She's fragile right now. The rejection hit her hard. And then the questions from Stanford about the alumni claim. It rattled her. I know you don't owe us anything, but if you could just talk to the admissions office, clear up any confusion. I raised my brow. Confusion? She blinked. Well, she listed Dad as an alumnus. Technically, he did a few courses there in the 80s. But he didn't graduate. That's not the point. It is to Stanford. I reached into my bag, pulled out a printed email, slid it across the table. They flagged her application after receiving an anonymous correction. Turns out truth matters when you apply to one of the most selective programs in the country. Victoria's face froze. You? She asked. They requested a reference. I declined. But I did send them an anonymous clarification. You sabotaged her. I didn't blink. I protected fairness, something you never taught her. Victoria leaned back like I'd slapped her. She's just a kid, Nora. She's 23. And I was 17 when you all decided she deserved my future more than I did. She opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. I still remember the birthday card she made for me when she was 8. It had glitter and crooked letters. She handed it to you, and you looked right at me and said, "Don't confuse her loyalty." Then you threw it away. Color drained from her face. I was invisible to you unless I was useful, I said, voice low, steady. And now you want to paint me as bitter for finally stepping out of the shadows. She looked up to you, Victoria whispered. She looked past me. Just like you taught her to. The silence between us thickened, swirling with years of omissions and rewritten memories. She reached for her coffee, but her hands shook. The cup hit the table harder than intended. A small clatter, sharp and final. You're colder than I thought. I met her gaze, unflinching. Just done pretending I wasn't watching. They kept saying I was one of them, but family to them meant debt, not connection. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I hadn't bothered turning on all the lights, just the warm glow from the standing lamp in the corner, casting soft shadows across the walls. The kind of lighting that softened sharp edges, though tonight, nothing felt soft. Linda and Olivia sat on the edge of the couch like visitors awaiting a verdict. Olivia's posture was slouched, hands clasped in her lap. Her makeup was minimal, like someone who'd either stopped caring or had been crying long enough to wash it away. Linda, however, looked composed, curated, like always. She wore a pearl necklace I remembered from my high school graduation, the one she hadn't attended. "I'm glad you agreed to talk," Linda began, folding her hands on her lap like a politician mid-apology tour. "We all made mistakes, but this is a chance to heal." I said nothing. Let the silence stretch. Olivia glanced at me, then at the floor. I didn't ask for any of it. I turned to her. There was no accusation in my face, just quiet curiosity. Didn't ask or didn't notice? Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. Linda cut in. "She carried our hope. That's not a mistake, Nora." I smiled, thin and sharp. "Hope's not a burden you assign to children like debt collectors." Linda blinked. Her mouth twitched like she wanted to argue or cry, but couldn't settle on which. I stood, walked to the bookshelf by the window, and returned with a slim black folder. Placed it on the coffee table between us with the same care one might place a loaded weapon. Linda stared at it. "What's that?" she asked. I slid it forward. The working draft of a memoir, tentatively titled The Unchosen. Her fingers hesitated before flipping it open. The first page was simple. A centered chapter title in bold. They invested in a name. I became a threat. She read it silently, lips moving. Then her eyes widened. You wrote about us. I wrote about truth, I said evenly. About how the college fund vanished without a conversation. How being invisible taught me to observe and to remember. Olivia leaned forward, eyes darting between me and the pages. Linda looked up, voice suddenly tight. You're going to publish this? I haven't decided. Her eyes flared. This could ruin... I held up a hand. I haven't decided. She swallowed hard. You can't. You wouldn't do this to your own family. Family, I echoed. You mean the people who watched me work night shifts and write scholarship essays while funding Olivia's dance camps? She didn't know. I know, Olivia whispered. We both turned to her. She didn't look up, just stared at the floor like it might swallow her whole. I didn't know it was your fund, she continued. I just thought it was always meant for me. Linda's mouth opened, then closed. Her hands gripped her knees, whitening at the knuckles. I let the silence breathe before speaking. I'm not looking for revenge, but I am done being silent so others can stay comfortable. Linda's voice cracked. You're going to destroy us. Number, I gave you a chance to change, I said, leaning forward slightly, the lamplight catching the edges of the manuscript. Whether you vanish after that is your decision. She stared at the chapter title again, then pushed the folder away like it burned. I haven't decided whether to publish, I said softly. But if I do, I won't be changing names. Forgiveness is not the same as return. And love without repair is just permission to repeat. The late October light slanted across the glass walls of my office, casting long amber streaks on the polished floor. The buzz of Pathlight HQ was muted here, insulated by soft walls, matte wood, and a quiet that had taken years to earn. I looked up from my laptop as Olivia entered, clutching a navy folder with both hands like it might dissolve if she loosened her grip. She sat across from me in the guest chair. Her eyes were clearer this time. No makeup, no posturing. Just the rawness of someone no longer trying to outrun the truth. Thank you, she said, voice low but steady. Not for the second chance, but for not turning your back completely. I didn't offer a smile, just a nod. She didn't expect more. I looked through the internship list. She continued, opening the folder. That nonprofit in Oak Park? The one that helps first-gen college students? I want to try for that. I nodded again. You'll meet Marlene this afternoon. She's tough, but fair. Sounds familiar, she said, almost smiling, then catching herself. I gestured toward the folder. You've got what you need. The rest is yours to carry. She stood, paused, and looked at me fully. No flinching, no flattery. I won't waste this, she said. I know what it costs. I didn't tell her good luck. She didn't need luck. She needed to walk her own way now without applause, without shortcuts. After she left, I sat back, letting the quiet return. Outside, the last leaves of fall scraped along the sidewalk. I turned back to my screen. Emails. Unread. Calendar, full. But one message sat at the top of my phone screen. A new text from a number I hadn't blocked, but never saved. Linda. I haven't read your book, it read. I'm afraid to, but I know I lost you somewhere. I stared at it for a long time, not because it stirred hope, but because it didn't. No apology, no ownership, just regret, shapeless and self-serving. I set the phone down, didn't reply. The apartment that night was quiet except for the soft hum of my keyboard. I'd long stopped needing noise to drown things out. My fingers moved across the keys, steady, deliberate. The document title blinked at the top. The Unchosen, Draft 3. I scrolled to the beginning. The screen displayed the first line of Chapter 1. This is not a revenge story. It's a story of reminding what they wanted me to forget. I exhaled, saved the draft, and closed the laptop. Then, slowly, I turned off my phone and closed the door behind me. There was no celebration, no curtain call, just the slow, steady exhale of a life no longer shackled by silence. Nora didn't slam the door on her past. She simply stopped holding it open for those who had long forfeited the right to walk through. What they mistook as passivity had always been calculation. While her family traded her future for convenience and control, she was taking notes, storing truths, letting time become her quiet accomplice. Every omission, every manipulation, every "you'll figure it out" became a brick. Not in a wall of resentment, but in the foundation of something unshakable. And when they came back, not with apologies, but with expectations, Nora no longer needed to raise her voice. She didn't need rage. Her presence, her refusal, her calm truth was louder than any scream they had once ignored. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. The reclaiming of dignity, of story, of choices she was once denied. She didn't burn bridges. She simply lit her own path and made sure the fire never went out. Because justice doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it's the refusal to be manipulated again. Sometimes it's a daughter saying, "No more," without flinching. Sometimes it's closing a chapter, not with fury, but with precision. And the most poetic part? They still didn't see it coming. They thought her silence meant surrender. But silence in the right hands is strategy. The real cost of betrayal isn't what is taken. It's what the betrayer loses the right to ask for again. In the end, Linda didn't lose a daughter. She lost the illusion that she'd ever get her back without changing. Victoria didn't lose face. She lost control. The quiet, generational kind passed down like silverware, sharpened into judgment. And Olivia, perhaps, lost the most dangerous thing of all, the belief that comfort was earned by proximity, not character. But Nora didn't write this story for them. She wrote it for the girl who once stared at a piggy bank labeled college and believed the world would play fair. She wrote it for anyone who's ever been told they weren't worth investing in, and proved otherwise. Because the truth is, healing doesn't require reunion. It requires clarity. And forgiveness is not the reopening of doors, but the removal of guilt from one's own shoulders. She gave them space, not absolution. She offered silence, not access. And in doing so, she finally became free. What began as a theft, of opportunity, of voice, of value, ended as a testimony. Not a vengeance, but a vision. Justice doesn't always come with sirens or courts. Sometimes it arrives in a quiet office under soft light when the ones who wrote you off must finally read your name in print and realize they no longer get to define its meaning. So let this linger, not as a warning, but as a reminder. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. And perhaps standing up today means you'll never again have to bow to injustice tomorrow. In the end, Nora didn't seek revenge. She reclaimed authorship. If this story stayed with you, if it stirred something quiet, or reminded you of your own silent chapters, don't leave without letting that feeling land. Because somewhere out there, someone is still sitting at a dinner table where no one looks up, still applying for aid while others get handed opportunity, still learning how to build a future from scraps. And maybe they just need to know they're not alone. So if you've ever been made to feel like a footnote in your own story, hit like, not for the algorithm, but as a quiet signal to the ones still watching from the edges. If you've walked this road, or are still walking it, subscribe. Not just for more stories like this, but to remind yourself you're not the only one turning silence into strength. And in the comments, leave a name, a moment, or just a word. Something you wish someone had seen. Someone who made you feel invisible. Or something you finally chose to reclaim. Because this isn't just Nora's story. It's ours. And the more we tell it, the less power silence has. Alice, you don't build legacies with code and keyboards. You build them with real achievements, like saving lives, leading firms, making names people actually recognize. You're not a disappointment because you failed. You're a disappointment because you settled for being forgettable. My father